the debate around dementia in football has been brought to the fore once again with comments from Raphaël Varane, the Manchester United defender, speaking to L'Équipe, the French football magazine. He said that my 7-year-old son plays football and I advise him not to head the ball. For me, that's essential. Even if it doesn't cause any immediate trauma, we know that in the long term, repeated shocks can have harmful effects. Personally, I don't know if I'll live to be 100, but I do know that I've damaged my body. The dangers of headers needs to be taught on all amateur football pitches and to young people. So I think it has once again sparked the conversation, which is never that far from the fore. Joining us now, the son of the great Nobby Stiles, one of the boys of 66. Nobby suffered with dementia in later years. Certainly the family feel this was related to his football career, as a number of the boys of 66, of course, died from dementia-related illnesses. John Stiles joins us now. Good afternoon, John.
Afternoon.
Yeah, so, look, I mean, so as you say, the discussion is just always there. Sometimes it takes a little catalyst like this, a piece, especially from a current player and a big player like this, to be talking about it so openly.
Yeah, I'm very encouraged that he's come out and spoken about it. I'm sure that the clubs and the football establishment won't be very happy about it. But if I could just, Paul, just let you know that specifically, dementia is a very broad term. The disease that killed my father is chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. I spoke to Willie Stewart last week, who's the leader in the field, and I asked him, I said, out of all the brains that have been donated for you to examine, football players' brains, how many had CTE? He told me it was 70%.
Wow. That's too much, isn't it?
It's not rocket science. If you get a head impact, the tau protein breaks off. If you don't get another head impact, it settles down over the years. They keep heading the ball, so these tau proteins clump together, settle on the brain, and destroy it. And that's what's killed my dad. And Raphaël Varane is very right to be worried because he's 30 now, and he will have been playing in academies. So he's probably been heading a ball regularly for over 20 years. So I'm really pleased that he's been courageous enough to come out and highlight it, because we've been trying to do it for 3 years and we've not really got anywhere. So it's great that he's come out and said so.
What could be done? Could you envisage a game without heading or players wearing protective skull caps, a bit like Peter Cech style?
It wouldn't make any difference really, Andy, about the caps, because it's still the impact hits and then the brain shakes and the protein breaks off. I don't want to abolish heading, Andy. Quite simply, it's not the matches, it's the training. So I would calculated my dad would have headed the ball between 70 and 100,000 times. Chris Sutton reckoned he headed it about 80,000 times. It's just the training, and if they could just reduce it in the training, it would help greatly. But they don't want to do it.
So there's no evidence at the moment, John, that is starting to happen. You don't sense that is starting to happen at clubs already.
Well, when Nuno Santos was at Tottenham, they said about the 10 high-impact headers, that's the most you can have in a week. He just said, I'm not going to do it. And football's about winning games. But no, I don't want heading banned. But what I do want, that all the players need to know about these risks. You know, I was talking to Chris Sutton, we agreed we'd both still have been footballers, but we wouldn't have played head tennis and we wouldn't have wanted extra heading practice.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to know about this.
We've seen people in the NFL, young guys who have decided, they've looked at the evidence and they've left the game. They've decided they don't want to continue with their careers. To hear Raphaël Varane saying this, footballers these days make quite a lot of money in quite a quick time, and there may be players who get into their mid-20s with young families, looking at their kids and their families and thinking, do you know what, I'm not prepared to take this risk anymore. I'm more or less set up for life as it is. We may see people retiring earlier.
I can't really, given the popularity and the rewards in football, Andy, Paul, you might be right, but most players want to play in the team. And if a coach says, you get out there and head that ball, they'd head a wall if they had to, some of them, to get in the first team. And that's one of the problems. And as I think I've heard you guys talk about it before, if a player gets a really bad knock in a match and they say, how are you? They're going to say, I'm all right.
Yeah.
They want to stay in the team.
It has to be
So
taken out of the
perhaps
players'
maybe.
hands, John. And that's the thing that
Yeah.
everybody has quite rightly said. The last person making the decision on whether they stay on the pitch or not is the player themselves. It has to be completely taken out. And you do sense that is happening more than it ever did before.
No, not really, because they won't bring in the concussion substitutes. But I'm sort of getting sidetracked here. The big thing that is killing all these footballers is heading the ball thousands and thousands of times. And there'll be a direct correlation between the amount of times they've headed a ball in their career to how bad the CTE is. And the concussion substitutes should happen, of course. But that is an indication that the authorities are not taking this threat seriously. It's like I say, there's 55,000 ex-players. That's how big the risk is.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. The other side of it is this old expression: "Well, you play as you train, or you train as you play." Do you know what I mean? You've got to play the same way in training as you play in a match. If you couldn't head the ball, that would affect training, wouldn't it? It's a difficult question for coaches, even though we all know what the right answer is.
Yeah, it is a difficult question for coaches. And like I say, the lads will head the ball if they're told to do it because they want to be in the team. But this isn't a new knee or a new hip. This is your brain. And my dad started getting ill when he was 60. And it was a slow, very slow, painful progression. And believe me, you wouldn't want this to happen to any of your family. Surely with modern methods, AI or, the heading light of sponge balls or something, I don't know, but this can't go on. We've got a load of ex-players in this country who are selling their homes to pay for their healthcare costs, care home costs. And I know that. And that's wrong. And these players, everybody needs to be educated.
Again, technology moves on. I do just wonder if one day CTE will be able to be diagnosed, because at the moment it's post-mortem, isn't it? It's an examination of the brain after the person's died, which they can confirm that. I wonder if there is a danger of that. But I suppose purely, as you've been saying, John, just purely by hitting the ball a lot, you're increasing your chances of dying of CTE later in life, aren't you?
Yeah, my dad was told he had Alzheimer's and he was told he had vascular dementia. We were told. When Willie examined his brain, he had no other dementia at all. He just had CTE. It's not rocket science. If you head a ball, if you have tens of thousands of head impacts, CTE is going to happen to you. It happens in all the head impact sports: NFL, rugby, boxing, ice hockey. It's evident everywhere, and it's a major, serious problem. It's scandalous that it's not been dealt with before.
We know you're on the new men's room as well with Neil Ruddock and Tom Skinner, and I'm sure Razor had some interesting stuff to say on the podcast, because obviously he'd be someone who headed the ball thousands and thousands of times over a career. That was pretty much a trademark of his as well. So people can go and check out John's chat with Tom Skinner and Razor. It's on the talkSPORT YouTube channel, and that's the men's room. Let's just finally share a happy memory of your dad. About 2003, when his autobiography came out. I've mentioned this before over the years. It's one of our favourite interviews. It was a fascinating chat with him. And I remember afterwards, he was waiting for the car to come and pick him up after the chat. And I was just leaving the building after the show, and he was just still waiting for the car. But a couple of people had spotted him in the street. And it was lovely. He didn't see me as I left, but I saw him talking to them. And he was back there. He was back at Wembley in 66, John. He was just... So I says to Mauro, and I turned, and he was just telling these stories. They were hanging on his every word. He was such an enthusiast for the game. He absolutely loved the game and was incredibly proud of what he'd achieved. And that was a bit of a treasured memory, really, seeing one of these guys being so humble, sharing his time and his stories with people in the street.
He loved it. He loved talking about those days. They meant so much to him to play for England, and well, with Man United coming back 10 years after the tragedy and winning the European Cup. What really impressed, we had no idea really what he meant to people until he passed away, because Dad never talked about football. And when we heard all these stories about not just his career but his kindness, it was very comforting. But he'd always make sure he signed everybody's autograph and had a picture with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a good man.
Definitely.
John, lovely to talk to you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for letting me speak about it.
John Stiles there. So go and check out the men's room, a longer chat on this topic with Tom Skinner and Razor Ruddock.
Paul Hawksbee and Andy Jacobs, Monday to Friday afternoons 1 till 4 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.